Hello and welcome, friends, to another episode of Fully Alive TV. I'm your host, Aaron Zauber of Fully Alive Coaching. And today we're going to talk about relationship dynamics, boundaries, and agreements. We're going to talk a little bit, revisit the subject of triggers and empowerment, unspoken agreements, and the nice guy syndrome. We're going to talk about playing different roles in terms of a coaching partnership, which is a type of relationship. And I'm going to give a few examples as well from my own life, maybe one couple from a client and some from a group around these topics. So, going to give the conceptual framework, and then we're going to ground it. We're also going to do a little bit of somatic meditation, following the tradition that we've started here. So that'll be fun. Little, 8-minute body scan, and want to invite people to call in as well if you'd like. You can just pick up your phone and literally enter the number, and you'll be on the air with me, and you can ask questions. That really helps. That phone number should be there on the screen. It's 919-518-9773. And feel free to call in and give me some feedback here. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you want to see more of or less of. It all helps. Or just a question from your personal life or your work life, anything like that. So the framework here, before I dive into the topics, is about being fully alive. So here on the show, we talk about subjects that are going to help you become more empowered in your life, that are going to help you be more in the flow and to experience more ease in your life, to experience more fulfillment, more sustainable inspiration that allows you to create what you want to create in the world and do what you want to do with more freedom and more fun and enjoyment. So that's kind of the big picture vision. And each episode or each show, every Tuesday about 11 o'clock Eastern, we talk about a different subject and go over some of these principles that allow us to be more fully alive. So, one more thing I want to mention is that I'm a coach, which means that I help people. I have conversations with people where we put both of our focuses on their system, on their life, on their physiology, and we discover what's working and what's not working in terms of them getting to where they want to be and living their best life. And I still have a few spots available for coaching. If someone wants to write me an email, which you'll find there on the notes, or an email is the best way, aaron@fullyalive.coach. And also, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can log into the chat. And that's a low-key way to type a question and ask it. And we may be able to read some of those questions and answer them here on air. Where I really, my best gifts come out when I'm one-on-one with somebody and I'm able to rest my curiosity gently on them and on what's happening in the connection between us, and then see what arises from that. Usually in my coaching calls, people get more clarity and they discover things about themselves. A lot of times they let go of painful emotions. They run into these spots where some painful thing comes up, and sometimes they're able to cry that out, or figure out a way to resolve that, and experience more freedom. Something magical happens when we're actually able to let go. And one of the things I'm most passionate about bringing to the world is not just this nice idea about letting go and telling people, "Oh, you should let go of that thing," which I think, we if we're in the self-development world or we get into some sort of new age circles or light and love communities, a lot of times we hear nice ideas without much practical help on how to actually do these things. Like, how do you actually let go? How is that done? How do you actually let go? So I do that with people. And literally, it's so simple that it's easy to miss. The way to let go is with the light of awareness. Okay, you can do it with your own awareness, just putting your awareness on your body, becoming aware of those delicate, sometimes painful, or simply high sensation spots, high sensation beliefs, some old wounds, things that are living inside of you right now. And with the light of your awareness, literally by being aware of these belief structures, these programs, this mindset, whatever you want to call it, there are many words for the frame of reference, the worldview that we take, and the parts of that. When we put the light of our awareness on those and gently rest it without trying to change it, but just being with it, which I define as love, the capacity to simply be with what is happening, what exists, then things can change. Then we can actually let go. We can allow things to move, which is what letting go really means. Okay, so that's enough of the preamble there. And let's get into relationship dynamics. So, this is a hot topic for me, as always. It's one of the things I'm most interested in my life. I used to actually call myself a long time, 3, 4 years ago, I called myself the real life connection coach because I'm so interested, so obsessed, so fascinated with human connection that I made it into sort of the name of what I do. But relationship dynamics. So, one example that I'll use is recently I was in a tough spot with someone close to me. And um, what happened was essentially was that I we ran into a recurring spot. So if you think about maybe someone that you're close with, a good friend, a significant other, and isn't it funny how we tend to run into the same spots over and over until we really get the lesson there, right? So one of the things that happens in our lives is that what's really going on is that our outside circumstances bless us with showing us what is happening on the inside of our bodies and inside our map, inside our worldview. Our outside circumstances, the circumstances that happen in life around us, that oftentimes seemingly have nothing to do with who we are and what's going on inside, they just seem random and happenstance. My perspective that I offer to you is that those circumstances are a direct reflection of who and what is going on inside of you, of the belief systems, the ideas, the especially the unconscious ones, the autopilot ones that appear. And one example that has happened to me for years and years is this um, this sort of work versus relationship. Let's call it a challenge. Yeah, instead of problem, we'll say challenge. I like to, if I can, frame things in a positive way, and challenge is a little bit more of a positive word than problem. So here's this challenge here. So when I put my focus on my work, I have this challenge of sort of abruptly disengaging with someone that I've been connected to and completely absorbing myself in my work. And the problem isn't so much in just doing that action. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's great. It's a good thing to, have a time for work, right? And I want you to see, where does this apply in your life? What do you have similar things that maybe you can learn from this scenario? That's my intent on sharing this situation with you. So so the problem occurs, or the challenge occurs, when shifting my focus away from this person, is that I'm not sort of what I could do to make it easier essentially is to let them know what's going on. Let that person know, hey, everything's okay. I'm simply just going to shift my focus and I'll be back later. Now, on the one hand, on the other party, there may be some sense of insecurity that, maybe I'm going away. And that feels hurtful. And then what can spiral out is sort of this little war. Do you ever get into little mini wars with your significant other where like one little thing sort of leads to the partner almost retaliating in a certain way, and then it can spiral out of control if it's not addressed right away. It reminds me of Brad Blanton's quote in from the book Radical Honesty. I've quoted this before, is that when we tell the truth, when we address a situation, oftentimes if we've let it go a long time without saying anything about it, without saying the truth, it can feel like a volcano exploding in the backyard. Those are not his exact words, but it can feel like a volcano going off, like, whoa, this is a big deal. And then maybe we sort of get good at catching these storms before they get crazy, right? These almost, if you can imagine, like a Tesla uh, electrical reaction starting to spiral out of control, and um, there's this thing they call critical mass, right, where this orb of electricity just gets too big and then grows all on its own. So if we can catch it before critical mass, that's good. And what happens is then it might feel like there's some dynamite that's going off. Like it still might be sort of a big thing, right? There's energy, there's trigger, there's like some hurt has had time to fester, but it's not as bad or not as crazy, not as potentially damaging as the volcano, right? And then ideally, if we can really get good at telling the truth as soon as the situation happens, it can feel like simply firecrackers going off almost all the time. You see that I don't know what you call that sort of consecutive order of things. There's charge in telling the truth. There's electrical charge sometimes because it can be a little risky, right? It can be a little scary to really admit what's happening, really admit what we feel. And sometimes it can just feel a little easier to get a little like a little what is it? Just avoidant about it because there's charge there. I don't want to say anything. I just want to try to smooth it over. I don't want to rock the boat. All these platitudes, all these nice things we say to ourselves in order to avoid a little bit of sensation, right? So essentially, this back in the day, I used to it was when it was really bad. I would literally, my early 20s, I would literally break up with my girlfriend at the time in order to go to work and get things done. Okay. And that was, you can imagine how painful that was. It's gotten to the point now where most of the time I can I can just, I'll go into work mode, which um which to this person can feel sort of harsh and cold. And it feels like I've disconnected, which partially I have, right? Partially I've just taken my attention fully off and I've gone work mode. And what um essentially what we've identified is that there's this basic fear around sort of disconnecting, and um I'm afraid that if I disconnect, if I shift my focus, that I'm going to essentially lose love. And that feels scary, to lose love, to lose approval, in other words. So it's sort of working with scenarios like that where we can trace back the spiral. Like a lot of times it spirals out of control, like we're talking about here. It gets into this crazy storm. And really it can all be traced back to some simple moments. And then it's like, well, what can we do about that? On the one hand, in an ideal world, it's like no one is ever needy. No one is ever afraid that they're going to lose disapproval. They just come and go as they please, and everyone's perfectly secure and always knows that they're loved. Me and everyone else feels this way, right? And of course, we live in a world where we can, where things aren't always like that, where we have different sort of fears and insecurities. So there's one mechanism that I suggest that I offer called, well, in some circles, it's called safe porting. What this is simply just verbally stating what's going on, what's happening, and sort of letting someone know that everything's okay. This is just like a changing gears, a gear shift, right? So I'm going to go, an example of this would be I'm going to go to work now. I'm going to shift my focus off of you and come back later. And I love you. And I look forward to connecting with you when I get back. Like literally just a couple sentences that sort of helps calm everything down. Because we live in this world where our systems are conditioning. When I say our systems, a lot of times I'm talking about our physiology. So our systems and our physiology is sort of conditioned to have these fear responses in a lot of us. There's subtle levels of trauma where, there's these unprocessed experiences from when we were very young and we thought that we were going to lose love, which we interpreted as a risk of not surviving. So that's an intense experience, and these experiences will sort of show themselves in these ways, in these different little ways, much later in our lives. Another way that they can manifest. Let me give you another example. Is in these what I like to call sort of nice guy agreements or unspoken agreements. So what that looks like is when someone makes assumptions about, if I do something nice for you or I treat you in a certain way, then I deserve that same treatment from you. And that would be nice, right? But the problem with that is that it's unspoken, and therefore there's sort of a conflict there. And there's just, you can see how that can lead to some conflict, to some troubling situations. I see this really in a lot of places. I see it so many places. I look in the culture is our fear of receiving things from people, myself included. I mean, just obviously the reason why I have so much to say about these topics is because I live them more than anyone else, right? I live them a lot. It's funny. There's this saying that we teach what we most need to learn. So whenever you see someone sort of, talking about any topic in depth, chances are they've experienced a lot around that topic. They have a big interest. It's a relevant topic for that person, right? So that's, I guess, my caveat here. But this receiving, when you receive something from someone, do you then feel obligated to give something back to them? I think it's pretty natural on the one hand to have that sort of reciprocal feeling. And I see a lot of times an example of this would be like going on a date with someone. Okay, say you're a woman and you go on a date with a man who's like really nice and treats you super well and does all these really nice things for you, and holds open the door for you, pays for dinner, uh, you know whatever it might be. So he's treating you well, right? Really trying to sort of take care of your emotional state, if you will. And at that point, are you obligated to give that person something in return? I would say the answer is no. And I think a lot of people would see that. We take it to an example that's a real example, a real life example that a lot of people encounter. And I would say that those potentially unspoken agreements around doing something nice for someone, like, oh, I pay for dinner and now you owe me a kiss, for example. I think that those scenarios they can just get really, really complicated. I think it's a function of boundaries. It's a function of having unclear boundaries and of being afraid to say no sometimes. Like that's what a so what's a boundary? There's a great book that I read a year or so ago called Boundaries. I recommend to a lot of people. Um, there's a subtitle to it, but it's called Boundaries, and it talks all about how to do it and why it's difficult and where to draw the lines because they can get fuzzy and it can be difficult, right? And we're sort of always adjusting our boundaries in life. We have these expectations on ourselves and others sometimes to always have consistent boundaries. For example, like if I said no here with you, then that means I'll always say no at this point with everyone else. That's not really true, is it? But an example would be, say, going on this date with someone where they treated you super well, and then sort of feeling like, do you feel obligated to go on a second date with that person? That would be another example of a boundary where you have an opportunity to say yes or no, right? That's, I guess, maybe the essence of what a boundary is saying no. And a lot of times we can tell where our boundaries are when um when we start to feel just maybe a slight sense of discomfort. So a lot of times boundaries are sort of protected by anger. And if we feel or we believe that a boundary of ours has been crossed, then we might feel angry, right? So there's a couple things that can happen there. One is it's a chance, it's an opportunity to examine that boundary. What's a good example of that? Maybe, oof, I don't want to take anything like too real right now. I don't want to like get into trouble over here. Um, but let's say just a simple example of this might be, you know what? I'll take a fresh example of where it gets complicated of like drawing the lines and the boundaries. Like so here in the culture, we're working out a lot of these issues right now. If you haven't noticed, around boundaries and how to say no, taking responsibility, how to speak up, right? These are all very relevant topics for a lot of us. And it gets complicated. It gets messy, right? I think I want to just encourage all of us to have compassion on ourselves and each other, especially around boundaries. And when we overstep or over our boundaries are sort of stepped on, because when we really zoom in on it with a magnifying glass or even a microscope, wow, the fine definitions of where the boundaries actually are can get complicated. And it can almost start to feel like we're walking on eggshells with each other all the time, can't it? Here's an example. So, so the other day, I made a really long Facebook post around consent. I talked a lot about consent as a hot topic. I have some thoughts on it, and um, then someone who had, quote unquote, loved that post. Right on Facebook, you can react to a post. You can like it or love it or laugh or be angry or whatever. Um, so someone who had loved that post, um, I messaged them, said, "Thanks for interacting with my post there." And this person indicated they wanted to come to an event that I host. And then so I added them to the group on Facebook that sort of tells about these events. And um, and then after and I also put a message saying like, "Hey, I added you to the group. Feel free to leave if you don't want to." But after adding this person to the group, I started to go into this deep thought spiral. Like I'm still in it right now, and I'll work it out a little bit here with you just to show you like how complicated these can get. So I did not ask permission to add this person to the group, right? And I could have. Like there was that moment, like I could have typed, "Would you like me to add you to this group?" So it gets complicated, right? Like at what level do we draw this line? Where like it just gets fuzzy. It gets fuzzy, I think, for a lot of us. Where do we draw these lines? And where is it okay to stop sort of like caretaking people and to assume that people have autonomy and responsibility and they can do as they please and it's not going to hurt anybody, right? Another thing about that, like this idea of sort of hurting people is people, with this sort of like trigger culture we live in now, people will often interpret their sense of being triggered as being hurt. They'll call it an act of violence, right? That's a lot. That's like a big deal. So we're sort of working out these lines. Here's something that I think needs to be talked about in this sort of trigger culture, if you want to call it that, or just I don't think it's everybody, by the way. I think it's mostly like a few very loud voices on the fringes that get a lot of attention because of the kind of the relevance as well as the squeakiness of those wheels, if you will. You know that how they say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So we're all sort of paying attention to this drama unfolding. And then again, it's also relevant. Like, where do we draw the lines when it's fuzzy? So, where am I going with this? I'm going to take a sip of coffee and think about where I'm going with this. See, an example of a safe port right there. I'm just literally, it's like letting you know what's going on. Just now, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Right? You ever get a massage from a massage therapist? They're usually really good at this. They've been trained. They'll let you know what they're doing before they do it. And that has a way of sort of calming the nervous system. Oh, here's what I wanted to say. So, when when I state an idea, when I throw out an idea, a belief that I have maybe to a group of 100 people, some people are going to feel perfectly calm around that idea. Some people on another end of that spectrum, say again, there's 100 people, one of them maybe a few of them are going to love that idea, right? They're going to be like, yay, we love you. We love that idea, right? They're going to associate that idea with me and you're going to say, we love you, even though it's just the idea. And then maybe a few people in this group of 100 people also feel really triggered by that idea. Now, is that my responsibility that people are having those reactions? Or is it their responsibility to take ownership of how they feel about an idea and just sort of own their experience, right? To own their trigger. I would say, in a way, it's both of ours. And maybe this is where the paradoxical nature of what's happening gets confusing because it's both, as it is most of the time, right? Usually, like you can see just so many things where usually the truth is found somewhere in the middle, or like the Hermetic saying, every truth is but a half truth. So, it's like this, for example. Say I'm walking out in the world. Like, just take me as an example. I'm walking out in the world and um someone says, um, "Hey, nice shoes." Well, I can take that in many different ways, right? Like, maybe I didn't really know how to take it. Maybe I interpret that they're like genuinely complimenting me. And I'm like, "Oh, thanks so much." Or maybe you interpret this, if you're in this position, as someone is sort of being derogative towards you. Maybe you imagine they're being sarcastic, right? And then maybe you feel a little triggered. And then, so was it their fault that the way you interpreted that? So what I'm wanting for people, what I want for myself, and what I'm, what I think will lead to people being more empowered. Like, what I really want is for all of us to be more empowered. That's what I want. I think that the more empowered we are, that the better everything will be all around. Like, the more peaceful it can be, the more we can just kind of relax and be ourselves. And we don't have to feel like we're walking on eggshells with each other all the time. Have you ever had that feeling where you feel like anything you say is going to set someone off? That's called walking on eggshells. And that can be just a sticky, sort of burdensome situation, right? So the more that we can sort of just relax and take responsibility for every part on our side of the street that we can, and then just, you know, understand that we have a framework through which we interpret things, and so does the other person. And we also have the opportunity to speak up for what we want and don't want. We can literally speak our mind. I think this is a big shortcoming. I think that, or a big opportunity for all of us, is in helping others become successful with us in terms of connection and peace and love and happiness. Is that we can, like I said earlier, we can catch these examples. We can practice telling the truth as soon as we see it, as soon as we know it, in a compassionate, present way. Like, that's ideal, right? We're all just sort of being ourselves, telling the truth. This is one of the reasons I actually really love that we have social media as a forum to express ourselves, and even to vent crazy opinions, because I think that there's value in that. I think there's value in just saying it how it is. And when people are sort of allowed to speak their minds, a lot of times when we tell the truth, there's this another meme about speaking our truth in the world. It's like, speak your truth. Cool. What does that mean? What is your truth? Your truth is an idea that you firmly believe, an idea that you believe so strongly that to you it's true. You know what happens a lot of times in my experience with speaking one's truth? I've done this 100 times, and I've led people through this same process hundreds of times, where someone speaks their truth. You know what happens is the awareness, it's touched by awareness. So there's a chance for it to, instead of sort of being locked in a cage, it gets to come out. Sometimes when you put an animal in a cage in the basement for a long time, that animal is not going to be happy when it comes out, right? It's going to feel like a mess. And I think that's why sometimes we're afraid of ourselves, parts of ourselves. We're afraid of anger, we're afraid of fear, because we've seen it come out and we're like, wow, it causes a lot of mess. But part of the problem is we've been trying to lock it away in the basement. It's not happy there. When we give ourselves and each other, generously allow, sort of give each other compassion to express themselves, whether we like the ideas or not, whether we feel triggered or not based on our interpretation of the framework. Sometimes we have, and people call, people use the word unsafe, right? They have these safe spaces and these places where they just sort of want everything to be calm. And it's like there can be a danger in too much of that, right? Because if we never allow ourselves to feel any discomfort at all, then maybe we are like, just consider, maybe we're trying to lock away a beast in a cage in the basement, and maybe that's not sustainable. Maybe it actually takes a lot of energy and resources to hold that thing down, right? Because that's ultimately what it is. And then we sort of, it festers and it gets angrier and angrier until boom, volcano, like we were talking about earlier, right? So the more that we can just, right when it happens, name it, acknowledge it, speak our truth, whatever we want to call it, watch what happens. A lot of the time, it changes. Sometimes it's very subtle. A lot of times there's just a relaxing around those ideas, and we start to hold them a little less lightly. There's many examples of people in their lives being convicted in your own life. If you think about it, think about 20, 30 years ago, some of the, if you've been alive that long, some of the things that you were convicted about, some of the things that you knew were true. And think about now how maybe you've let some of those go, and maybe you've sort of opened to new possibilities, to new ideas. Maybe you've sort of rounded out your perspective a bit. There's this thing that I see happening a lot in popular culture, where when one person gets triggered, a lot of times the other person automatically accepts responsibility for that other person's reality. And I think that's dangerous. I don't think that's always the case. Now, maybe in some cases they clearly did something that was wrong. Obviously that's a given, okay? However, just to default into someone being triggered means the other person did something wrong is a very dangerous slippery slope, because essentially that is, again, like, go back to the shoes example. Say someone's trying to give me a compliment and then I lash out at them because I think they were being sarcastic. That's just a misunderstanding, right? That's a misinterpretation. I ran that idea, I ran that energy through my framework of interpreting reality, and I came up with the idea that that person is in the wrong. It's it's not necessarily true. So I encourage people to, as much as we can, assume the best about people. Assume that people are always doing their best. Okay, that if you were in that other person's shoes, you had the same experiences they had, you lived the same life they had, you would probably have the same beliefs they have, and you would probably be trying to survive. You would probably be trying to thrive at some levels, right? Both. And you'd probably be trying to do your best in the world and making sense out of this crazy life that we live in, right? So, really practicing giving others credit for trying to do their best, it's a good practice. And, I think ultimately when people are sort of trying to lash out, or they're hurt, I mean, when they're trying to lash out, essentially it does stem from a wounded place. And if we're all connected at a fundamental level, beyond the simple physical forms of our bodies, if we're all connected, and it's easy to see how we are when we really tap into the sensations of human connection, feeling what other people feel, empathy, then how is it possible to try to blame someone else and persecute someone else without persecuting ourselves? Essentially, what we do to others, how we treat others is how we treat ourselves. The world is a reflection of us. So the more that we can take personal responsibility for our framework and then compassionately be with someone in those intense moments. And I'm going to go into the meditation here in a minute as an example, as a practice of learning how to be with intensity. It's like, if you want to be powerful in your life, if you want to be successful at what you do, effective, if you want to make something happen, then it takes energy, right? It takes power. Power is literally, it's literally energy. That's what it is. Like, where do you go to get your power? If you have electricity in your house, it comes from the power company, right? They're also known as the energy company. Power is energy, electricity, and it runs through our bodies. Do you get it? So, you can see that, like, when we're playing on an iPhone, like, literally it's happening through electricity. It sends and receives information through an electromagnetic signal to towers and then instantly communicates with another phone, another human being. So we're fundamentally electromagnetic, energetic creatures, and then we have these bodies, these physical forms. And when we can practice embodiment practices, we can practice allowing our system, our bodies, to open around the intensity of life, to be aware, to be present with the high sensations when there's a lot of energy, also known as a trigger, right? I feel triggered. You see someone who's in a triggered state, ooh, they're feeling a lot of energy. So when we can get good at holding power, holding energy, holding sensation, and by holding, that's not even really the best word for it, because it's more like allowing it to flow through us. Holding actually is a very exhausting thing to do, but sort of just being open to it and allowing it to flow. That's when it works well, and then we can skillfully direct it, right? So that's a lot of the intent, that I want you to be empowered. I want you to be embodied so that you can create the life of your dreams, so that you can have the fulfilling connections with others that you really want. And usually the most fulfilling connections you can have, where you experience flow, is not in a flatline state. It's not in a depressed state, is it? It's in a place somewhere between a little bit of discomfort and a lot of discomfort, right? It's that happy medium where it's a little bit challenging. You ever notice that when you challenge yourself just a little bit, that you start to kind of feel alive? Yeah. So that's why it's not a bad thing when we feel a little uncomfortable, when we feel a little bit of discomfort, when we're exposed to ideas that we don't agree with, when we experience some of that magnified, amplified emotional state. It's actually a good thing. One more example. Take a little sip of coffee here. One more example that was really fun. Just a couple of days ago, I was in a group just practicing connection. We're all there for the purpose of connection and sort of group consciousness practice. And I was expressing some of my ideas, and I was feeling happy and free and like really getting into it, passionate, right? And all of a sudden, one of the women, it was two women, two men in the group, and myself included. And one of the women goes, "How are you feeling right now?" And it was just like, whoa. And everyone in the group, all of a sudden, we're just in this sort of like really intense state. Because to me, here I was at the upper edges of my dynamic emotional expression. I was in that sort of light, passionate place, as opposed to this sort of more lower grounded place, if you will. And I've had many experiences, specifically of, how should I say it? Particularly of women attempting, but not just women, men and women attempting to sort of stymie or lessen my expression. Like when I've been in happy states, really coming out, a lot of times in my life, they've tried to take me down. They've tried to be like, "What's really going on?" And they haven't trusted my happiness. They've thought, what I think ultimately is going on is that they sense they sense some of the deep emotions within me. I've never been able to hide what I feel. It's just not a skill of mine. And so people will feel that they'll feel me going high, and they'll sense this sort of thing that's not being expressed, like there's some sort of like repressed emotion, and they'll attempt to touch it. And for me, it can sometimes feel a little affronting, a little confronting. So what I did in this situation is, first of all, slowed down. Okay. Someone was just asking a week or two ago, like, what do you do when you're in a reactive, tense situation? So, first of all, I slowed down, took a few breaths. Okay. These are things that we can all do when we get into intense situations. And notice that increased sensation. Take a few breaths, and I paused. And before answering the question, because I just sensed like something, I felt like something's not in connection here. Something didn't feel right. So I just paused and I got curious. And I asked, "Why are you asking that?" Maybe I said, "What has you asked that question?" And then actually the sensation sort of increased a little bit more. And it ended up essentially that with that slowing down, that what I was explaining a minute ago, she was trying to get to some of the emotional depths within me, but it was in such a way that it felt abrupt, and it felt like she was missing who I was, or she wasn't really willing to be fully with me where I was, and she was sort of trying to rush to the emotional connection. And then I sort of felt, I don't know, ignored at some level, or eh, it felt to me like it was controlling, and she didn't want me to express myself or something. But we ended up actually resolving it, and there were some tears in the room, like plenty of tears actually, like all around, because it was really intense. So the keys to resolving that situation were staying in connection, slowing down, noticing what was happening in our bodies, taking breaths, and naming what was happening in our bodies. Okay, these relationship dynamics can be used anywhere. They can be applied in almost any situation when the emotions get high, when someone experiences a trigger, right? When this sensation is increased. So so those are the keys, and I hope that you find that helpful. So let's let's segue into this somatic practice that we typically do. Just a quick body scan, again for the purpose of cultivating awareness, for the purpose of tempering your vessel, for the purpose of sort of expanding the bandwidth of your emotional wires so that you can hold more current, you can be aware of more, you can be more powerful, you can be more effective, you can get more done, and you can be in more fulfilling connection with people. Literally, this is the opportunity that's allowed for in such a simple practice, especially when done consistently over time. This type of scan, I highly recommend Insight Meditation app. They're super amazing. They're free. I think they do have a subscription thing that you can check out, but they have like 3 times the users of is it 3 times the users? No, it's 3 times the amount of time spent on the application in terms of actual practice getting done, and they're just as far as I can tell, seem like a really great organization. I love that Insight Meditation app. They have a bunch of free guided meditations on there. You can also check out my meditation lineage, which is dharmaocean.org, and their free guided meditations. They come from a super badass lineage from Tibet, just super embodied, a not, practicing not spiritually bypassing. And the practice that I'm going to do today, it's, it's not from their lineage. I'm not certified with them. So I just want to make that clear. It's just a body scan that allows for the embodiment and for some of this empowerment to take place. So if that sounds good and you'd like to do that with me, I invite you to join along for the next few minutes. I think that it'll really benefit the whole rest of your day. So I encourage you to give it a shot. All right. So become aware of your breath. That means taking a deep breath. Feel free to do that, or just noticing, where's your breath at right now? Is it shallow? Is it light? And if you notice a judgment arise when you put your awareness on your breath, just notice that and let it go. You don't have to dwell on it. And begin to rest your awareness gently in your feet, noticing each of your toes, the arch of your foot, heel. Notice how, as you place your attention in your feet, that sensations begin to present themselves to you, just a little bit increased, right? Huh, there's a lot of sensation there. Yeah, that's literally your power revealing itself to you. So noticing your ankles and gently allowing your feet to relax as deeply as they can. Allowing your attention to rest in your lower legs, your calves and shins and bones of your shins. And whenever you have a thought, just bring your awareness back to the sensations in and around your body. Noticing your knees, letting the sensations gently drain into the earth. Noticing your upper legs, just putting your awareness there and gently inviting your upper legs to relax. noticing your pelvis, just gently inviting your lower torso to completely relax as much as it can. Noticing the organs in your lower torso, your low belly, intestines, your low back. Noticing from your mid torso all the way down your body. And as you notice the sensations in and around your lower body like this, maybe even sensing an inner breath of awareness that is cleansing and healing, revitalizing the tissues and organs and systems in your body, cells. Noticing your mid chest, mid torso, where the rib cages meet, relaxing, noticing around your heart, your upper chest and lungs, giving awareness, bringing love, your presence to this body that you have for a time. Feeling your upper back, shoulder blades, shoulders. Notice your upper arms down to the elbows, forearms. Lovingly caress your body with the light of your awareness. Your fingers, I mean, fingers, palms of your hands. Usually there's a lot of sensation in the hands and fingers. Noticing your neck and throat, your jaw and face and eyes. Just relax it all. And the back and top of your head, including your brain, and just allow your awareness to be over and in your entire body. You might be aware of a lot more sensations in this moment if you did this simple practice. What we're doing here is allowing the wisdom in our bodies to present itself to us. When I say us, to our awareness, to what we really are. So, thanks for doing that practice with me. I hope that you continue to do that practice or practices like it because, like I mentioned, it does allow you to be with the intensity of life, especially when life gets intense. And what is the point of life other than to be with it, to live it, right? So I would love to know some of your feedback. Feel like I've kind of gently touched on a lot of topics today that I think a lot of people have feelings about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to know what you think. That would mean a lot to me. If you would like to email me, aaron@fullyalive.coach. You can always, like I said, log into the chat on YouTube and ask a quick question. I just got a couple minutes here, so we're gonna wrap up soon. But we air every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So you can always tune in live, call in if you like. What I'm doing here, we're so used to the guru method in our culture, where there's an expert and there's someone learning from them, and there's a there's a time and place for that, for what I would call mentorship or teaching. And that's, in a way, that's sort of what I'm doing here is I'm sharing ideas with you, sharing knowledge. But what I really do in the world, the big purpose of offering these ideas to you is, of course, one, to give you food for thought and help you have a framework that truly empowers you at an individual level that benefits you and everyone around you. And also so that I can spread the word about my coaching. Because what we're doing right here, this is not coaching. Coaching, the way that I do it, is very different from this sort of teacher student thing. Coaching is literally taking your awareness plus my awareness, putting it on you, and I offer you my presence and my gentle curiosity, and really approve of exactly where you're at, wherever you are, offering you that presence again, and then gently asking questions around your belief system and your framework so that you can examine what's working and what's not, so that you can live the life of your dreams. And like I said, a lot of my clients experience, crying. They experience really letting go of some deep stuff and of leveling up in their power and their awareness and in their capacity to act. That's all power really is in the neutral sense of the word. And a sense of being more fully alive, of having more clarity on what they will and will not tolerate, on their boundaries, when these sticky situations present themselves that we're talking about here. Because it helps, right? It helps to talk to someone who can be curious about the situation. And as much as it's amazing to take our own awareness and practice putting it on ourselves, there's something magical that happens when we take two awarenesses, mine plus yours. It amplifies what's going on. I mean, it turns the volume up. Imagine a volume knob. It turns the volume up on your experience so that you can see it better. You can experience it more clearly. You get a higher definition picture of what's actually going on. And you are the expert on your reality. Okay, I think that's a phenomenally new paradigm in this world. We've come from just a few hundred years ago, literally, not very long ago, people were literally tied to a wooden pole and burned alive for disagreeing with certain ideas, for seeing the world a different way from the accepted fashion of the day. So, all the way from that to this radical new paradigm of literally you can see the world in a different way from me, from the way I see it. We have different perspectives. And that's not only okay, but it's beautiful. And it's exactly how maybe things are sort of set up to be in this reality, in this dimension. So I offer that to people, and it's always an honor. So thanks for being with me today. Really enjoyed sharing these ideas with you. Let me know your feedback. Tune in next week. Love and peace, and be fully alive. See you next time.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.